It's been a month since we met last. There's been a lot happening, and I'm looking forward to giving you all an update about all that. But before we do, I want to hear from Tim and hear what's going on way out there in Eastern Oregon.
Not a lot going on out here in Eastern Oregon. Haven't been able to get out and enjoy our public lands too much in the last few weeks. Just been busy getting everything finalized with our new office and getting ready for a virtual fly-in to DC next week to work on 2 different bills. So yeah, just been busy in the office really.
What bills are you working on?
To be reintroduced to S2828, the wilderness for the Oahe, and then the Wild and Scenic River bill that Senator Wyden introduced.
So this is in Washington.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Wow.
That's so then also BLM resource issues that I see. So trying to get more resources for them. So.
Well, that's great. That's an exciting trip.
Yeah.
Marette's got a lot to tell us, or maybe she doesn't want to tell us.
Good morning, everybody. I've just been kind of laying low. We had quite a bit of snow and ice here for a while, and it was hard to walk, but it's melted out. And so we've been walking up a little cinder butte near our house pretty regularly called Hinkle Butte, just to get in a little cardio and see the world. Beautiful view up there from the lookout. And I had middle ear surgery yesterday to try to restore some hearing in my left ear, and this made me so grateful for the great doctors and nurses that are out there, and they're just so cheerful and nice. The whole gang at Ben Surgery Center was so awesome, and my doctor said that I had a textbook surgery and I should have some more hearing back in my left ear when he pulls all the plugs out and stuff. So that's an exciting miracle, and I'm really grateful that Carl talked to me about it too, because he knew some details that I didn't know. So thanks, Carl, and glad to be here.
Glad to see you here, and your eyes aren't spinning around. That's all good. Hey, buddy, Mark Stern, what's going on?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see people. Marek, congratulations on successful surgery. That's good to hear. Plugging away. I mean, like a lot of people, been outdoors some. I testified in front of the House Ag and Natural Resource Committee, as some of you know, and that was kind of interesting to watch that process and the receptivity of the legislators and committee chair Rep. Witt managing an online Zoom process with a confused speaker list that kept him confused, but doing a good job as best he could given the situation. He managed it nicely. And, been outside and birding, and, the snow geese are back on Snowy Island in good numbers. They've abandoned Lake County where Carl is. So that's good news to see him coming north.
Great. Thanks for all your help with the legislative stuff. Hey, Chris, what's going on?
Hey, everybody. Hopefully you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Perfect. Same, everybody else, just been grinding away, especially with the legislative session, for work and getting outside some. And I had to be down on the coast today for work. And so right now I feel lucky enough to be able to have service and take this call and be along the Wilson River. It's a beautiful day here, or it's overcast. The rain stopped from this morning, and the river is a beautiful steelhead green. So it's a pretty remarkable to take this call right now.
Chris, it's pretty remarkable to be seeing you, because it all looks great. Your video's good, the sound's good, and there you are sitting on the river. It's amazing.
Well, I'm definitely closer to Tillamook. But yeah, I was actually pretty amazed that I only have, I'm using a hotspot on my phone. I only have a couple bars, but you guys are coming in great. So I'm stoked.
Is that your laptop? Are you using a laptop?
Yeah, I'm on my laptop right now. Like, I'm just running a hotspot off my phone with my laptop. I have my laptop plugged into the car, and so good to go.
Very resourceful. All right, well, thanks. So Mark Labhart, let me just say about Mark, with this legislative session going on, Mark keeps popping up in every spot that we need help. And Mark has been unbelievable, going to the right meetings, knowing the right people, saying the right things. I just wanted to say how much we appreciate that, Mark. You've been incredibly valuable to us. So thanks for that.
Sure, thank you. Well, I see Moret's got off now, but I was gonna say, it's just amazing what doctors can do nowadays to, do ear surgery and have it be successful. We don't want to lose track of that technology effort that makes us all better. So I actually, my wife and I got to sneak out a little bit, and we snuck into Carl's country for a day. We went down to Tule Lake and did an overnight trip down to Tule Lake. And I can tell you, Mark Stern, that there's still, we must have seen 1,000 snow geese down there on Tule Lake. So there's still some around. Got to see trumpeter swans, tried to identify all kinds of ducks that I thought I knew my ducks, but I definitely don't. But there's a few 100,000 still down there. And then we came back home up through Crater Lake, and I got a picture of me standing by. It's got to be at least a 10-foot snowbank up at Crater Lake. And so the snow is pretty good up there right now. And then came back to the beautiful Central Oregon. I wish we'd get a little bit of that rain that's over there in the valley right now. It's kind of a beautiful day here, but we're supposed to get some tonight. So had a chance to get away for a short trip.
That's nice. Hey, Mark, you drove right by my house, man. I'm mad you didn't call me.
Well, it was, I even talked to my wife about it. I said, I ought to give Carl a call, but then he'll ask us to come over. And we were it was a 2-day trip. It was down from Sisters to Klamath Falls and down to California, and then overnight, and then up to Crater Lake the next day and back home. So it was a quick trip, Carl.
We live right by 97, so you went.
Well, I did drive right by your place then.
Jane, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I was actually on longer than it looked like I was. I just logged into the participant site instead of this one, so I got to hear your updates, but then I didn't show up for a minute. So here I am. I'm okay. I cracked a vertebra in my back, so I've been kind of having to lay a lot lower than I like to lay. But that's okay. And conservation projects are coming along on the island that I'm excited about. And the nursery frenzy has started. And I was watching the movie Soul the other night, and they were talking about your purpose. And I decided, one of my purposes is just to get all these native plants out into the Portland region and, take care of the birds and bees and things by making sure that people fill their yards with plants that support them. So that's kind of fun. I'm enjoying it. So
Well, Jane, thank you for doing that. That's a wonderful thing to enrich your soul. I'm glad have found that.
Right.
Davia, what's going on with you?
Morning, everybody. Maybe I'll take from what Jane said about native plants and tell you all that this month I'll have been in my house for 2 years. When we bought it, it has a ton of mature landscaping. The previous owners were professional landscapers, but they didn't maintain it for the last few years. They were older. And so when we moved in, one of the downsides in my mind is not a single native plant. It's all Asian varietals of different trees. And finally last month, or I guess January, February, every weekend, we were out there trying to bring it all into more manageable sizes because it was just like a jungle of overgrown Asian varietals. Every weekend we were out there cutting, trimming, trying to make nice shapes. They all broke over the ice storm weekend. And there was one that survived, and later in the day on Saturday of the ice storm weekend, the bigger tree above it just crushed it. And so we spent the last few weekends cleaning up all of the broken trees around our house, but I'm seeing it as an opportunity to replant natives. So Jane, we might have to connect about that. But yes, definitely. Yeah.
Well, once again, Davia has been working like crazy. She's involved in way more than just this with ODF&W, and she has been putting in an awful lot of time shepherding all the things through the legislature and making sure everybody's on track. So she really has, she's always done extra duty, but it's been even worse here lately. You know, I think Mauricio, I do recall something about Mauricio being late.
You're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
he had
Be late. So as far as what's happening for me, I think I sent out, I'm pretty sure I sent all of you a video or a link to a video of swans. Did you guys get that? I'll tell you a little bit about that story. That's a barley field near my house that they traded. The farmer traded that farm to be able to farm on the refuge. And what he did is he planted a whole crop of barley, left it, and then went down and farmed on the refuge because they don't have water. They couldn't flood, and it's much more productive. So he grew more barley than he would have on our field. And the refuge is happy about it because that would have been grain for birds. Well, then we found out that we couldn't have water either because of the water situation. So for a while, there was very little water on the farm, but then we got the weather, and then we have a spring on the property that started flowing stronger, and make a long story short, it flooded. And then once it thawed, the swans descended. Like first there was like 10 swans, and the next day there was 30 swans. The next day there was 100 swans, and the next day there was 3,000 swans. And at the maximum, there was close to 10,000 swans on this 300-acre farm. I had a neighbor call me and say he was going to sue the farm because he couldn't sleep at night. They were so loud. It was an incredible spectacle. And we got to watch it. And then in about 3 weeks, they ate every grain of barley and left. So they're probably up in the Willamette Valley now eating somebody else's farm. But that was a spectacular thing. And as I said in that email, it reminds us why we're doing what we're doing. It was just an incredible phenomenon, and so wonderful to
Carl,
see.
the Columbia Land Trust is doing some amazing work just across the river from the island in Washington State, where they're farming 525 acres as a cafeteria for sandhill cranes.
Oh, wow.
And the work they are doing is so interesting. And it's basically, how do you take the takeaway from it might be, how do you take a working farm and just do a few things that make it more attractive to waterfowl? And in their case, they just came up with the coolest things, like they left a few empty rows that provide a landing strip for the cranes to come down out of the sky. And they found if they planted a few rows of alfalfa, little rodents would hide in it, and the cranes like the rodents. And they're doing the science on it, and it would be fun to do something like that for the swans or for other species. So we should talk somebody into doing a project along that line in Oregon so we can fund it.
Yes, Jane, I'd love to learn more about that, because
Yeah.
the opportunities are immense. Just further aside, with all that barley, the voles exploded on the farm. And with that, we would have 20 red tails, 5 or 6 rough-leggeds, 10 marsh hawks, and 8 or 10 bald eagles, all in this field, eating those. It was like a popsicle stand. They were just voles running everywhere, and they were eating them up. So it was a wonderful thing to see. You just add a little bit of resources.
And wouldn't it be fun to do the science on that and figure out how you could do that on a more long-term basis, of like, what are a few things that you could do that would, increase the voles and increase the raptors and increase the swans. And so anyway, I think there's some fun potential there.
Yes, I agree. Let's find an Oregon project and fund it. And I'll leave one last thought on that. If none of you have ever read a book called Rambunctious Garden, Jane, I think you would particularly like that. It's written by Emma Maris, who happens to live in Klamath Falls now. She didn't write it when she was here, but it's an incredible essay about exactly what we're just talking about, nature and interaction with agriculture. And it's about having a rambunctious garden. So it's a great book. So, all right, that was great. Really nice to hear from everybody. now we got to get to work. This should be a pretty short agenda, which of course is good. But first off, let's just go ahead and do the minutes. Everybody got those. Are there any comments about the minutes? And then can we get a motion as Davia has just put up on the screen?
Carl, I'll move to approve the February 5th, 2021 meeting minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
And I will second.
Great. Any comments? No comments being heard. All in favor, thumbs up. All right, looks good. All right, so we had the minutes approved. That's always good. The next thing on the agenda, I think, is an exciting update from Davia on where we stand. Everyone will be happy to hear where we stand.
Sorry, I was on mute. I said a lot of funny jokes while I was on mute. You all missed them. So here's where we stand. $378,710 raised to date. This includes committed. So some of this cash we don't yet have in hand. But in the last month updates, we got a commitment from the Oregon Zoo of $25,000. And that's an unrestricted donation. The zoo usually does a small grant program for conservation projects. With their large reduction in staffing over the last year, they kind of saw an opportunity to hit two important metrics for themselves. One, supporting the OCRF, and two, putting this money into good conservation work. So we're working with them on the agreement to move that $25,000. We also have a commitment from Sustainable Northwest for an additional $25,000 that's reflected here. And that's restricted to the Holton Creek RNA project. And then we got a couple other $1,000 or $5,000 donations from individuals that have come in recently as well. So that all is reflected in that $378,710 amount that we have in hand. Go ahead.
Did you get any clarification on that one? Was it $1,000 from a
I have not, and maybe
somebody
anyone else
knows?
Yeah, and we got a $1,000 donation to the department from, it looks like it's somebody's donor advised fund. And so probably from an individual, but we don't have documentation on who that came from. And so we're working on running that down.
Davia, I think we should reach out to the zoo, which you probably have done, but we as a committee, I mean, that's a pretty big award, and we should really express our gratitude for that. So,
Yep,
does anyone here have any connections with people on the zoo? Any of the members?
I used to, but I don't really so much now. I worked there for 29 years, but.
Oh, wow. Well, Davia, you and I should look into that and get with them.
Yeah, and maybe Carl, it's a letter from you to the zoo.
Okay.
And we're gonna, I'm gonna have a meeting next week with the Oregon Zoo Foundation to talk about ways we can market this to their members as an opportunity for matching, as in the zoo put in 25,000. Let's see if we can get their members to do the same. So we're gonna talk about that next week.
Carl, one thing I can do is I can certainly find out who at the zoo you need to thank, because that money is coming from the conservation folks rather than the Zoo Foundation. So let me see if I can figure out who the person is now.
Well, Jane, that would be great, Jane. We need to let them
Okay.
know how important that is. I mean, that gets 2 projects done. gets us down the road. And so,
You know, and another thing to talk with the conservation people about, not the foundation, would be, do they have other projects that they could run through us so we can do match?
yes,
So that's another conversation we can have with them.
right.
If
If
they've
you
been,
could,
you know, they've funded sea otters and condors and all kinds of things that would make sense to run through us.
Jane,
Yeah,
since we're going to codify that whole process today, if you could do that, reach out to them and explain that project, that's really valuable. So that would be really good.
Okay.
Hey, Carl and Jane, I have a name of the Conservation Impact Manager up at the zoo, and she, I bet, is in the middle of that as well.
And
Right.
I have her name too, unless it's changed in the last few months. So Nadia, right?
I think so. I'd have to double check, but
Yeah, I
that'd be
have
a
her
good-
email address. So I'll reach out to her and then figure out who else needs to be thanked.
So the donation letter is signed by Bob Lee, the general curator at the zoo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know Bob.
Okay, and I've been working with Shervin Hess, who's the social media manager.
Okay. Okay.
Davia, can you clarify that 51,000 at the bottom? What exactly does that mean?
So that is just the top two numbers subtracted from each other to get that number. And so this red number in the middle of what we've obligated, accepted restricted gifts for or spent is the total amount for projects and including restricted gifts. And that means that we have $51,000 right now that we have not obligated yet, which is sort of my transition to here's the next 5 projects on the contingent list. And so that we have the funds in hand that we can go to these next 5 projects on the list this month.
Wow, man, I hope you all, that is so exciting and gratifying that is happening. And we're moving down that list. And these are all really good projects. I'm excited about all of them. So thank you, Davia. That's great for that update. We just got to keep this going. And later on, I think it's in part of no, Davia, it's not, I don't believe, but you sent out today a update for folks that like, I think a general email to people that follow OCRF. And there's a great graph at the end of that shows our fundraising. And it's the kind of graph that you want to see. It's actually, are you able to pull that up?
I think so. Just give me a second.
The point is, it's a bit of an not existential curve, exponential curve. That it's really refreshing to see it. And I guess we seem to have, it looked like we were just kind of getting stuck around a couple of $100,000 a month or two ago. And it didn't seem like we were going anywhere. And all of a sudden, we're knocking at the door of $400,000. So that's a nice looking graph right there. So we just got to keep that going. And I think with this program that we're going to talk a little bit more about today, we really have the opportunity to bump that up. And so success breeds success. And we should be showing this graph to our legislators and pointing out the support that this organization has. Mark, I know you're going to be on the panel for the working session, and this might be something useful to express what we're doing. So anyway, that's great. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments about our fundraising today? Jane, your mouth is moving, but we can't hear you.
At some point, I want to see the list of what's left on our project list after we fund these next 5 projects.
Right.
Because I think that would be helpful.
And
I
with
know
what,
I have that list someplace, but if the list has changed, so maybe it's time to update that a little bit for us.
Yeah, Jane, I can update that and send it out with the meeting materials.
All right, well, great. So,
I guess a question would be, is that how, if and when are we gonna take up the remaining funds and what projects we're gonna pick off?
Mark, I didn't get that whole question.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking out loud, but we have additional dollars to obligate, or how are we gonna go through that process of, picking off which ones we're funding? And I realize there's kind of a ranked order of sorts, but how do we intermix the equity projects with the conservation recreation projects at large?
Yeah, we addressed that earlier on. In fact, made a final list of a ranked order where the equity projects were all moved up into the upper third. And so we have just about funded all of with this amount, we're close to funding, I believe, all of the equity projects. And we're doing it in an order. We have a ranked order that we all agreed to, and we're just moving down that list. And I'm pretty sure that this pretty much covers all of the equity projects thus far. The other corollary to what you brought up is that if we were to receive restricted funding, that would go to whichever project it was restricted for. So it would jump the list, sort of like the Holton Creek situation, which is further down the list, but we got a $25,000 grant for that project. So that went to that project ahead of the others. But otherwise, we're just following the rank order. Does that answer that for you?
Well, maybe. I didn't think the ranked ordered list I saw had integrated the equity ones with the conservation ones, so you knew how those came together, but maybe I just haven't seen the latest list.
Yeah, we more or less just took those and alternated them.
Okay.
So I think I do believe there may be one left, but I don't think so. I think this is it. So
Great.
That's great. So if there's nothing else on that, okay, she's got the list here.
Yeah, so Carl, this is the list, and it's posted on the OCRF web pages, on the department's pages. And so it is kind of the full list, and the highlighted ones were funded in January. And so the next 5 are these 5 that we talked about. And I think it does cover all of the outdoor equity projects, and then it goes all to the rest.
And so now that you mention it, Mark, I think that Wallowa Resources one was the lowest ranked of the outdoor equity pieces. So it is, in fact, going to be the next one up.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for sharing that.
And just to elaborate, I asked Davia for a list of all the projects. And so she gave me a full list of all the OCRF projects with commission approval. And that's a pretty good list too, because it shows from the very beginning all the way through the complete list that the commission approved. So, and it kind of shows, the funding, project title, organization, eco-region, everything. So you got it all in one place. If you want, I'm sure she can send that list out to you too.
And I believe that the list is on our website, on the Oregon is Alive website.
But it's in pieces, I think. Yeah, it's in pieces, kind of different segments. And she's got a document that shows them all in one spot.
Yeah, sort of how you want to look at the information. So we've got the round 1 projects, the round 2 projects, and the contingent list projects on the website. And so at this point, we could put an all the projects list up there as well, if that would be useful.
It really is getting to be an impressive list. I'm so proud of what we're doing. I have to say, it really is great. And we're moving down that list, and hopefully we'll keep doing that. And to reiterate for all of you, and as well as for people in the audience that are following this, there may be some people out there that are recipients. there's still, the intention is we're raising these funds as we go and we're moving down the list, but the worst case scenario is we would end up funding those with the match. So if we have not raised unrestricted funds by then, we're still going to fund those if the match is reinstated. So speaking of the match, I think it's time to move on to the legislative update. Davia, you can give us that.
Yeah, just sharing slides to help us orient. So this is the slide I actually showed at the last meeting of the 4 bills that are related to the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. And so these bills, the information I have on here is the bill number. What's in parentheses is who introduced the bill at the beginning of the session, and then just a few notes about each of how they affect OCRF. And the bill that has become the primary mechanism, or the one that's had the most emphasis as a starting point on this, is House Bill 2171, which is the governor's omnibus recreation bill. And the origin of this bill is the governor's task force on outdoor recreation, which Kalen, that was one of his primary projects at the outset of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. And Chris, I believe, was a member of that governor's task force on outdoor recreation. They put out a really great report full of recommendations for improving outdoor recreation in Oregon, and they had a couple major goals. One of those being protecting natural resources as we improve access and opportunity for recreation, including implementing the Oregon Conservation Strategy and fully funding the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. And so that's how the Conservation and Recreation Fund became a part of the governor's omnibus recreation bill, which is a question we've had quite a bit because of that task force report. So House Bill 2171, it formalizes our relationship with the Office of Outdoor Recreation by statutorily requiring the person in Kalen's position to be an ex officio member. It removes the sunset on the Conservation and Recreation Fund, and it restores the $1 million general fund commitment. There's a -2 amendment that is really the piece that we're focusing on. And that amendment allows, as soon as the bill is passed, we would be able to access match for everything we've raised to date. And then throughout the next biennium, we'd be able to match the rest of the $1 million as we go. So that's a good mechanism for the Conservation Recreation Fund. There was a hearing that Mark Stern mentioned earlier on February 11th, and it was a little bit of a weird hearing because the chair of the committee had some issues with who had signed up to testify, and he kept accidentally closing the hearing too soon and going on and coming back, and so there was definitely some confusion from legislators about the bill and what it is and what it does, and Mark Labhart in particular has been working really hard to get to the next step, which is a work session. So the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee had a hearing on the bill, and it took testimony from the public. The next step is to host a work session where that committee will vote on moving the bill forward. If they take a positive vote, the next step will be this bill moving to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, because it has a monetary component. So that's what's moving on House Bill 2171. The other 3 bills listed here, we are at the phase of working on getting these to have a public hearing as well, just in case there is an issue with 2171 in the future of this session. We have another mechanism to give us more time and some money for the Conservation Recreation Fund. Any questions or other information people have?
Mark
Abby,
Labhart?
is there a timeline for when these other 3 bills might have a hearing, or by when they need to have a hearing?
Great question. I don't know of a timeline yet for them. And there is a deadline, and I don't have it in my head, but it is sometime in April. And they need to be posted for a hearing, like that public notice of a hearing has to go out sometime in March. So it is an important thing to try to do this month.
Mark Labhart, do you have any comments on what you're seeing and what made you do?
Yeah, Davia covered it pretty well. The backstory, two representatives from the governor's office, two from the conservation community, and myself had a conference call with Representative Witt this week. And the end result of that is he wants to, we believe, move the bill forward and get it out of a work session. He felt pretty strongly about that. He is lobbying for, he wants the bill to be bipartisan, and he wants at least 2 Republicans to support the bill. We've got one right now that said that he is going to vote yes for it. And there's 3 others, Representative Kate, Representative Post, Representative Breeze Iverson, that have been contacted, have had conversations with some of us and the governor's office. And we are hopeful. We've got at least a commitment from at least one of them that she is willing to let the bill move through the work session and on to Ways and Means. But that's not a for sure. Representative Witt said that there will be a work session probably after March 11th. So we need to watch pretty closely. It's going to be fairly soon. And that they're likely going to have a panel at the work session to discuss that. And Representative Witt has asked me to be on that panel, and Amira from the governor's office, and boy, I can't remember one other person. And so it's still a closed session, not allowing public comment, but we will be there on the screen in case there's any questions that the representatives have regarding the bill. So I'm optimistic, but you never know with the legislature that the bill's going to move forward. And then I always get these two mixed up, but I think I got them correct now. As 2600, which is Helms' bill, that came before the Sportsman's Caucus on Monday. And that is a group of legislators and stakeholders.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I can't find my.
So that is a bill that is a Representative Helms' bill, and the Sportsman's Caucus is made up of legislators and stakeholders. And that bill received a support from the Sportsman's Caucus. So that's the one that allows the transit lodging tax to fund the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, which was one of our recommendations from the original task force. And then the department's bill, I don't think Davia said it's not scheduled. 2666 and 2913 haven't been scheduled yet. Correct, Davia, for a hearing? Yeah. So that's what I know, unless there's any questions, folks.
Does anyone in the committee have any communication with any of those representatives Mark mentioned? We did talk to Post and Representative Cates. But if they're in your district, or if there is any way you can communicate with them, that would be really helpful. So we just got to convince them to move that forward. Chris Hager, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
You guys have a pretty good presence in the legislative process. Do you have
If I take off my advisory committee hat and put on my steelheaders hat, then yes, we've been able to at least our lobbyist was able to talk to Chair Witt and give steelheader support for the bill and wanting to push it forward. So yeah.
Do you know if your lobbyist has any relationship with those?
Potentially, I'd have to check in with him, but I wouldn't put it past that he probably does. Yeah.
Well, if that's something, I think just if they a lot of it, I know from talking to some of them, they're new, and they just don't have the time and the bandwidth to process all of this stuff. And the more they hear about it from people they trust that would say, yes, this is good, the better it is. So it'd be
Yeah,
great.
if I could weigh in on that, clearly that's the case with Reese Iverson and Kate. They're both brand new. And so I think they're just trying to understand the bill.
Yeah. So the more they hear about it in different contexts from different people, the better. That was my sense. I think they're both smart and favorable towards the idea, but they just have too much going on right now, and it's hard for them to focus. So we anything we can do to facilitate that would be great.
I was just wondering if there's any particular opposition to it that we should prepare for. Do we anticipate that there are going to be some things that we need to be explaining, or what if there's any concerns that we might address if we reach out to people?
I don't know if I would call it opposition. I would call it, it's a fairly standard process. Representative Dreesen, who is, I don't know if she's chair of the Republicans but high up in the Republican ranks, they don't like any taxes. And so she said that she's had some concerns about, because this is general fund dollars. So she's raised questions on that. Representative Weber, who is a new representative from the Tillamook area, who I know very well, she had the same questions about it, but I think because of that, she is just trying to learn about it. So I reached out to her, and Representative Owens had the same questions about, well, I don't understand this money thing, and what was the commitment from before, and kind of back and forth about, essentially the 50,000 foot is taxes. We're not in favor of any new taxes. And part of it, I think, is just because it's an understanding of what the bill actually is. And I agree with Carl, these new representatives are just drinking from a fire hose, and they're just trying to figure out, the legislative process. So it's kind of like no with everything that has anything to do with taxes. It's just getting them to understand what it is, and I think they'll support it. But I've reached out to both of those and waiting for a call back to try to talk to them. But they aren't part of the Ag and Natural Resource Committee. They're would be voting on it in either full House or some other subcommittee that I don't know if they're on Ways and Means or not. But so that's my take on it. So there's some pushback. That's not, I don't think, real strong. There's not a big group out there saying we're going to vote no on this no matter what. So at least that's what I haven't heard. But again, you never know.
Jane, I would echo that. I think it's more of a question about using general funds for about any purpose, and that's the resistance. And we have had tremendous support from our coalition. Oregon Hunters Association particularly has been helpful. Srishti Kamal has just done a fantastic job with Defenders of Wildlife. We've just had great support from our coalition in this. Really appreciate what they've done.
And I'll just add to that, Jane, you might hear, and this is an important thing to answer, the way the bill was drafted originally, there's a summary for every bill, and it's usually like a one sentence thing about each thing the bill does. And when you look up House Bill 2171, it only shows 2 lines of the summary, and it says, directs Oregon Conservation and Recreation Advisory Committee to consult with the Office of Outdoor Recreation when making recommendations regarding use of the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund monies. And so among our constituents, people have read that and thought, well, this bill is trying to mess with how the advisory committee does its work. But the actual text of House Bill 2171 and the -2 amendment simply codifies our existing relationship with the Office of Outdoor Recreation. And so that might be a question you hear, not when talking to legislators necessarily, but when talking to other members of our coalition. And I think we've done a good job of answering that and explaining that really we're codifying the existing relationship. But that's a good one to know. You might get that question.
Yeah, I think when the bill was written, I don't think the governor's office knew that Kalen was already on our committee as an ex officio member. And when it came to their attention, they go, "Oh, we better fix that."
Yeah, so that's important for the members to know. Those amendments totally make it a palatable bill. I always talk about it in the context of those amendments. Davia, Leland Brown wrote a note about saying that it would be a good time for a letter from coalition to show our broad support. And isn't Jessica working on that currently?
Yeah, members of the coalition should have heard from Jessica at the Wildlands Network with the request to continue using your logo to support House Bill 2171. We submitted the coalition letter in support of the OCRF as part of our testimony on House Bill 2171. And so because there's 4 different bills, we've been using that sort of broader letter that indicates support for the program in place of a letter in support of an exact bill.
But are they trying to come up with one for this bill or not?
I don't think so. But that would be a question for Jessica, I think. I can ask that.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on the legislature? This is very important for us. It's pretty much existential. Okay, well, Davi, do you want to move on with the annual report, which we need to finalize?
Sure thing. So at the last meeting, I shared a draft annual report with you all, and there was a lot of great suggestions for improving it. And so I sent a new version yesterday, and I'm trying to pull it up to share, and it's hiding from me. But here it is. Asking today if you've had a chance to review it, if the committee is comfortable with it. We can take a vote if you want. It's not something you need to vote on, but making this a final document that we would then direct to the legislature. And just zooming back a little bit on the context here, the House Bill 2829, which created the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, requires the advisory committee to submit a biennial report to the legislature. And the way that biennial reports from advisory committees are guided in statute says that a biennial report will arrive to the legislature during a session with an odd number year. So this session is the time for reporting, and that report would go through the end of the first year of that biennium. So essentially what is due is a biennial report on 2018 to 2020. And since this committee didn't form till March of 2020, we're kind of reframing it as a 2020 annual report, with keeping in mind that if the committee is extended, the next report will be a biennial report. And so with the committee's approval, this letter will get a cover letter with Carl's signature, and that will go to every member of the legislature and the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee. And so it's a good opportunity to let them know where we are and remind them that this program exists.
Any comments on this annual report? I hope you all read it. It's really quite nice and impressive.
Yeah, Davi, I would say you did an amazing job of putting it together. It just really captures, I think, what OCRF has been up to. It's well presented, and it has a lot of really strong, the pictures, the photos, it's arranged really well. So I just say kudos. It's really an excellent annual report. Nicely done.
Dottie, I had a question. Is this ready for prime time in that we could release it to friends and at Facebook and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, I'd say so. So we used this with our testimony on House Bill 2171. So we've already put it out there a little bit. And with your approval today, then I'd say let's call it ready for prime time. And I'll send it out. I think the next step from my perspective is that you all can share it as broadly as you like, and we'll send it out to our list of followers as well.
I think it's important that we formally accept this. I don't know that we have to have a formal motion, but we could accept this document. And so, yep, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Tim Davis, is your thumb up? Put your video on. But yeah, so thumbs up, everybody. Is everyone good with it? All right, fantastic. Davia, nice job. It is real. And Marat, that is a great idea. Now people still ask me, well, what are you doing? Well, this is it. This is the way to answer that question. And so any way that we can get this out, once again, I keep talking about the website. If we can have a link to it on that front page of the website, that would be really great. So yeah, that's a really useful document. So thank you, Davia, for that. Is that enough of a acceptance for you? We're good with that?
Yep, that works.
Okay, now it's time to move on to an important matter of business, and that is this protocol for matching large restricted donations. As you all remember, we approved that concept of allocating 30% of the forthcoming match back to a project that someone has donated greater or $10,000 or greater of restricted funds. So we all approved that, and we just Davia came up with some language that formalizes that. In addition, Marat and Mark Stern, as well as myself and Davia, particularly Mark and Marat, put a lot of time in thinking about how we would onboard these projects. It's certainly easy if it's a project we have already vetted and have included, but then we all know there are many projects out there that could qualify. And so Mark and Marat really came up with some thoughtful ways to process that. So Davia, do you have that written up, right? Maybe we should start with just the basic rules for the 30% match, and then we could talk about the interim onboarding process.
Sure. So I shared this with the committee in draft form, and I have it open on my computer here in the Word document with the track changes, so we can work on that as a group if we need to. But the premise here is that we have our expenditure framework. That's what this document is. And it talks through what the department is going to make expenditures on. And with the idea of restricted gifts, and as a result of a restricted gift, we will make a new expenditure of general fund if we have that general fund available. I think this fits in with the expenditure framework because it is going to guide how potentially upwards of 30% of our general fund will be spent. And so just trying to capture why this exists and what kind of the rules are for that is why I've stuck it into the expenditure framework. And so pending approval from the committee, we would update the expenditure framework online for this. And then we can build out kind of marketing materials for how this will work with the foundation that'll be based on this. Is this big enough?
There is a sort of a long preamble in this. The few paragraphs, we decided it would be a good idea to put this in because as we go around talking about this, people have questions about, well, how does this work? Why are you doing it? And the reason to include this in the framework, it's very descriptive of how we arose at this strategy. And so we thought it's worthwhile because you can refer people to this document. A lot of people have asked me, well, what is all this about? Why are you doing this? And this gives us the background for it in that first 4 paragraphs, and then shows the actual process. So Davia did a great job of putting those two together to kind of formalize this and explain not only how it arose, but the process going forward. So that was the purpose of all that text in there. Any comments on this? Well, I guess y'all love it. And you all read my preamble, just thought it was a work of art. I can tell by your silence that that's what you think.
Hey,
So
Carl, this is just an observation, and maybe it's me, but I think for somebody not familiar with the program, the 3rd paragraph could still benefit from some clarity. And I guess as we go forward, I'd allow the possibility for Davia to do some editing for clarity there, because I think we're kind of talking to an inside baseball audience among the 10 or 11 of us on the phone. And I think somebody reading that cold might not really come away with what is intended. I mean, I fully support what's intended, but I just think somebody not very familiar with it could.
well, Mark, you've learned throughout this whole process that every time you bring something up, I assign you some work to do. And I would absolutely love for you to craft that in a way that meets those goals. And if you could help Davia with that, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Because I see what you're saying, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, glad to.
Great, thank you very much. So given that, can we would we be able to formally adopt this with the caveat that Davia and Mark will work on some of the language? Is that Davia, do we need to do a formal, we can just thumbs up it? Okay, so let's thumbs up for this as it is with the caveat that there will be some editing. Everybody good with it? All right, looks good to me. Fantastic. Thank you all. Well, great. As the next step in this, now that we've got this is really important, you guys. I think this is the path forward to really hit that $1 million and to really get people's interest and get things going. So it's a big deal. And the next step in this process, now that we've accepted the basic material, is how do we onboard these? And again, because Mark spoke up last time, he got appointed to a committee, and Moret as well, and they came up with a really nice framework for that that Davia also sent forward. And this is the way they foresee proceeding, and it outlines how a project could be brought forward. That includes a subcommittee that of Carl, Mark, Moret, Davia, and also Chris Hager, who has graciously agreed to participate. Those projects would be reviewed by that subcommittee. And then there's certain criteria that would need to be followed as outlined there. And then that subcommittee would bring that back to the full committee for approval. And this is for particularly for those projects that have not already been vetted. Like for instance, I think we're going to be able to apply this whole mechanism for the Marine Reserve project that we have already vetted and accepted. We would not have to go through this process for that. But I think we all individually know of very worthy projects that would fit the criteria for the Oregon Conservation Strategy and our framework, and this is the mechanism to bring those on board. So.
I just want to make sure that I understand. This is if somebody brings the funding for it. And does partial funding count, or is this like, I've got $10,000 and I'll fund the whole project?
It could be partial funding. It had the only caveat, the only criteria we had from this was $10,000 or greater. And that
What I'm wondering is if it's a, let's just say it's a $10,000 well, no, it's got to be $10,000. Does it obligate us to put it on the list for future donation solicitations, or it's like that's the 10,000, we're funding it with that money, and then we're going to move on to the next thing on the list?
Yeah, if it's a restricted donation, right? It would be
Mhm.
$10,000. Someone says this is for this particular project.
Okay,
The only thing that we're obligated to do is give that $10,000 to the restricted project. And
okay,
then match that with 30% when the match becomes available. So if
Yep.
someone gave us $10,000 for the Marine Reserve project, we would forward that to the Marine Reserve project. Then presumably in July, when the match was available, we would then give another $3,000 to the Marine Reserve project.
and maybe it says this here, but what if they don't need another $3,000? What if the $10,000 is the ask for the project?
I see what you're saying. I think that would certainly have to be a case-by-case situation.
Okay, I mean, because if they have a $10,000 project and somebody funds the 10,000, and then we say, oh yeah, and we're going to give you a bonus, 30%.
I understand now. The
Okay,
contracts that we have, that we develop with all of these, there's a budget.
okay,
So if it's like, well, wait a minute, this goes over the budget.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't do it.
so I don't know if that has to be, maybe that's already in here, but if it's not, maybe that should be clarified. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jane. And we put it in the expenditure framework that a donor would have to choose to do this, right? A donor could give $10,000 and not want the match. They could just give the $10,000 and they wouldn't be part of the program. But we didn't necessarily put that the person and the organization doing the project needs to agree and have a purpose for that extra amount. And so that does seem important. And so maybe there's a step in here of consulting with the project proponent and getting their
Thank
approval.
you, Jane. I didn't get where you were going at first, but now I understand it. That's a good idea.
Hey, I'm looking at this again, and I think that first question isn't really answered very well. I kind of missed it. It says, when would a new project be considered? And we just said committee members would work through networks, but we didn't really say when. And I think the answer is anytime. I mean, we're not holding people to a certain time limit or when the project solicitations go out. This is an anytime kind of, all right, great. Thank you.
I just thought of another thing. I was looking at some of these projects, and some of them are for less than 10,000, like Holton Creek is 5,000. A thought might be that people are willing to give 10,000 or to fund the entire budget of the project. Because when I look at this, there's only a few of the things on our list yet to fund that amount to 10,000. So that might be something to consider, is like, if somebody's willing to write a check for the entire amount needed for one of these projects, maybe we want that money. I don't know. And then we can take that one off the list.
I think that's a great concept, and that would be easy to fix. We came up with the $10,000 because we didn't want to have a whole bunch of, $1,000, $100 checks. Is just too much to follow. But if it's for the full amount of a project, that's easy to put that into our criteria. We could say the $10,000 limit or the full amount of the project in question. The entire, expenditure amount of the project in question. But a lot of these projects, even though it's $5,000, like for instance, Holton Creek asked us for 5,000. That was just a piece of a much bigger project. And so that's why there's a $25,000 donation towards that project.
Okay.
Because they needed more than that. The
Mhm.
only reason these are, I can't think of well, maybe there's a couple of them that weren't for more than what they asked. You know, they're just, they were just limited to a number.
Okay.
But
Well,
that-
that's something to look at.
So Davia, do we want to work would we need to work something like that into it, or do you feel like that's covered with what we've, I think a lot of this too is we have some degree of flexibility. If that situation arose, we would certainly pay attention to that. We could always bring it to the committee and say, oh, wait a minute, here's a situation where, here, I'll show another example. Let's say you had two entities that wanted there was a $10,000 project, but one entity wanted to give $6,000 and the other entity wanted to give $4,000. Well, we would not turn that down. and so I think we could bring those maybe back. I don't think that it's precluded to bring that back. Well, we might have to make a special exception and say, okay, well, that's $10,000, but it's from two sources. We'll accept that as the committee. And just might be, something to do in our meeting. So I don't think this is tight enough that it'll preclude some creative thinking, since that's what we're all about, right? Creative thinking, new ways to do things. Does that sound right with you, Davia?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Davia is the arbiter of all the stuff. So with those comments, are people pretty comfortable with this? Yep, thumbs up. I'm seeing thumbs up everywhere. Great, 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 great. Well, we'll accept that. So this is a big deal now because we have a framework, and I'll digress a little bit. We've had some input on our framework without being specific. One particular individual who knows a lot about this kind of thing took it upon herself to review our entire framework, all the work that we had done building our base, which through those miserable first few meetings that we struggled through. And she was extremely complimentary to our framework and how we thought things through, laid out a coherent process. And so this step right now is making that more formalized, but also makes our document a more contemporary and viable thing. So we should be proud of the work that we've done to do these somewhat painful steps. And I'll once again thank the people that have really put in some time, Rhett and Mark Stern, particularly on this, to really craft a good document. So thank you all for that. Okay, so that was a big deal. We have on the next thing in the agenda is other business. And that was just because we didn't know if anyone had something new to say or anything to add. So this is, if you do, this is your opportunity. So if any of the committee members have questions or comments or have some new ideas, we'd love to entertain it.
I just want to know if Chris Hager's going to dip a pole in the Wilson River before he leaves today.
I don't know. There's a potential, but not until this afternoon. But I would love to. I mean, the water looks amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's perfect condition.
Oh, Mark, it's like I was driving down and I did bring this stuff just in case if I had time, but
Oh, it's tough duty doing.
I know.
Well,
You got it.
well, Chris, we're going to get this meeting over with a few minutes early. So time, man.
it looked
guess,
like Jane had something.
What's that? I didn't.
Jane.
Oh, I was just gonna say, seems like at this point we should be looking forward to when we're going to be soliciting more proposals. It's gonna be a while before we get these last ones funded, but do we have any thoughts about when we're gonna be, because the reason I ask is I think people may be asking is when's it gonna be the next opportunity to submit proposals?
Yeah, Jane, and I think that's all dependent on the legislature. I mean, it's, we made that decision with our sundown 3 months away, that we really couldn't really do another solicited fundraising proposal. However, I think that as soon as we are confident that this is going to happen, and I'm not sure Mark Labhart may know when this actually becomes real, at what point in the process where we're told your sunset is removed and you're going to get $1 million match. When does that become real enough that we could, in good faith, have another fundraising round? But I don't think we can do that until then.
It becomes real when the legislature passes the bill, in both the House and the Senate. That's,
Yeah.
And when does that usually happen in the,
Well, for reference, the governor signed House Bill 2829 that created this program on July 12th of 2019. So that is a reasonable timeline for when we might know. But I think Jane raises a great point, and there's kind of a risk management approach here. The committee members, if you want, can put some time into getting ready for a July RFP, in the hopes and the expectation that the sunset will be removed, and you can do that work, but there's risk that the sunset won't be removed and you'll have done that work and it can't go anywhere. So I think that is a good question to ask, and something the committee should think about.
well, that's one of the advantages of us having these somewhat foreshortened but monthly meetings. That way we'll have a better sense each month where things are going in the legislature. And if it's starting to look really positive, maybe the committee would be willing to put the work in to set the stage for a solicitation process early, right away. And I think we would want to do that. If it looks good that we're going to be put forward into the future, then we should, get that on the ground quickly. So that's a great comment, Jane, and we'll just have to keep our eyes on it.
And it also seems like it might make it more compelling to go ahead and pass this bill if we've got all these great projects that are waiting in the wings, and look at all these cool projects. Or, we want to get moving and get the next set of proposals, and we can't do that till you guys pass this. So, there might be some way to use that to be more compelling. So
I like your thinking, Jane.
I would say, Jane, why don't we're going to go before the legislature? You're the time to do it.
yeah. Okay.
You got the line down. That sounded great. I'm convinced. So go lobby. Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I just reach out to, Mark Labhart and Davia, as you guys hear about work sessions or committee meetings, hearings coming up, public hearings, to let everybody know, because I think that's really our opportunity to weigh in, and particularly to work with whoever we know to work on that bipartisan support is going to be really key. So I don't know, Mark, how we can help you as much. I think you've got a lot of those closer connections and relationships, but I think everybody ought to be prepared to help weigh in too.
Yeah, well, I'm registered nonpartisan, so I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. So, but we need to get one more Republican on that committee. So, Bree Syverson, or somebody that knows Bree Syverson or Kate or Post, just to get them to say, yeah, let's just move this across the finish line with the work session and let it do its thing in Ways and Means, which I think we got a pretty good chance after we get it in there. Just getting one more. And Brock Smith did say that he is going to try to find another Republican on the committee. So, but he has not called me back to say he's been successful yet.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Well, then, I think that covers it. Chris needs to go fishing. Let's, we do have, Davia, has anyone extended desire to speak from the public?
So we have two members of the public today. We've got Ken McCall and Leland Brown on, and I moved them both over. They can unmute themselves if they'd like to provide comment.
Go ahead, Ken.
You're gonna let me go, Leland?
Yeah.
I had a question, not a comment, but I wondered where the committee is. It'd be Davia and Carl question, I believe, where you are on filling the two vacant positions on the committee.
Ken, that's a great question. And we have, I actually recently reached out to one of our applicants to see if they'd heard anything, and they had not. And I don't know of a formal, Davia may know more than I do. I don't know of a formal announcement.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Ken. We have been trying very hard. It's been many months to get those appointments. And I have, the most recent update I have is that the governor has approved someone for the Nearshore and Coast Range seat. But there's been no formal movement to actually make that appointment. And I think they're still looking for the Columbia Plateau Blue Mountain seat.
Thank you. And Chris, get out of that car and go fishing.
Leland?
Yeah, it's good to kind of be back on these meetings. I kind of lost track of everything for quite a bit. So it's nice to see things still moving forward. Seeing that list of projects that have been approved for future funding was really good. But like Ken mentioned, I think it would be really important to have that available to the public to see once they've been, now that they're approved, once funding becomes available. It becomes another tool for the coalition members to use. And also that brings up, ORTWS donated $10,800, I think, and there was some discussion about being able to be part of the decision on where that funding would be spent. And for us, seeing that list of projects would be pretty critical, right, for making a decision about where we would like to see that money go. So that'd be helpful as well for all that.
Leland, I think because we have now, that brings up a very good point that we should discuss. And that is that $10,000 from the Oregon Wildlife Society, the wildlife, that's the Oregon Wildlife Society, right?
Yes.
That actually could have been given. We didn't have this in place at the time. That could have been given as a restricted donation because it's $10,000 or greater. And you could have picked a project that went to. And then we would match that 30% if that project was eligible for an extra $3,000 when we get the match. The question that does bring up that we should talk about, and it's my fault for forgetting to do this, or maybe I did mention it, is whether to make this retroactive. And I can say that would be that we've had some greater than $10,000 donations for specific projects. In particular, the Pew Charitable Trust was for $60,000. Leland, I really appreciate you bringing this up, because one of the things that I personally think would be a very powerful statement would be that if we made this retroactive, and that would be for instance, the Gilchrist underpass is close to the finish line, but is not over the finish line. It's, last I heard, is something like $300,000 short. to get what they need for their.
It's honestly, Carl, we're at about 830 right now, so we're closing in on that.
830.
Out of either 950 or $1 million, depending on whose estimate you read.
Okay, but you're still short.
Still short, absolutely, absolutely. If anybody's got about 150,000, we are happy to talk.
Well, what we do potentially have, Ken, the committee is 18,000, because that would be matching we already know we're going to get, if we get the match, we're going to get 100% match for that money Pew Charitable Trust gave us. But I think that we could retroactively apply this current match back to that project, so that there's another $18,000 for that project. I think that Pew Charitable Trust would be extremely appreciative of that. They went ahead and gave us that money knowing that it was a unrestricted match, that we would spend it the way we wanted. We'd still have 70% of that to spend, but that gets a very important project closer to the finish line. I think, and then we have this Wildlife Society $10,000 grant that we could consider to be a restricted fund, that they could select the project and match. We would match that with.
Yeah, so in the communications around that donation around beginning of February, it was indicated that that did apply to our donation, because I think it was an email that you sent to our president, Carl, that we could potentially, we could select, and then we were waiting. I think she replied, maybe, this is the problem, is we've had some disconnect within our board. So we're working through that.
I have to say, if I said that, I spoke out of school, because we
Okay.
had not accepted this until basically last month.
Right.
Well,
this must have been right after you accepted it, because you said that at the recent committee meeting.
We didn't receive that till after we accepted it, then we certainly could do it.
Right. So I guess that comes up, is the discussion around communication around these grants. If they don't initially come in with restricted fund, what sort of communication happens to allow that to occur? Because without access to approved grants, because we're not coming in with a project. So I think that may be part of the communication around some of these larger grants that needs to be thought a little bit more about how you want to address these projects. Because of course we would like to see that 30% match be addressed to this. We want to extend these funds as far as possible. So if there's ways to accomplish that, then we're 100% in support. So I just wanted to bring that up and also get that list so that we could actually look at it, and if it was possible to make some selections.
We can certainly get you that list. If it makes it easy if that funding came in after.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you right now, I mean, ORTWS is not going to want to fund a recreation project.
Sure.
That's just not what we're about. We want to fund the conservation strategy. So we're looking for projects to fund that will accomplish the goals of the conservation strategy.
Well, why don't we get you that list and go from there? But what I would like to ask the committee is just for comments and thoughts on the projects, the monies. I mean, how many did we get, Davia, that were more than $10,000 that were restricted? We got the Pew one. I'm trying to think of another one.
In terms of restricted gifts,
Yeah.
that would be the
Greater
only
than 10 that were greater than $10,000. That would be the only one. So what does the committee think about making that particular project retroactive, since that's the only one that we can think of that would have met this criteria? What do you think about applying that 30% match to that specific project? Anybody have any bad heartburn about that? Jane? I don't know.
I would just say if Leland is cool with that, we should be cool with it.
Because I think that goes a long ways. I can't wait to call Pew Charitable Trust and tell them we're doing that. and what that might mean for us longer term. I think it's a really good gesture for us to do. Buys us a lot of credibility and goodwill. So if we're all comfortable with that, then I'm going to go ahead and reach out to them. I meant to bring this up, but I forgot. So I'm sorry.
Hey, Carl, it's Ken here again. Really, really appreciate this last conversation, and my bad for not bringing the same up. I thought that was, well along the way toward happening.
It was in my mind. I didn't bring it
No,
up.
not a problem. We got there. This is awesome. Two things. One, Leland, if you want to call a match on your 10-8 or whatever that was, I've got a great suggestion for you over in Central Oregon on Highway 97. That was a plug, obviously, but I've also got Pew on speed dial, Carl, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to see if you can beat me there.
Okay. All right.
I'll give you a whole day, Carl.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, that's good. I think that's a good thing, and I apologize for not remembering to bring that up earlier in this process. So,
And I guess one more comment, and this one goes to Davia. Depending on how this cycle works for funding for the 30% match, I've still got about $60,000 space on the ODOT agreement with OHA to transfer funds, so we can do that process again. We have it all lined out. Happy to help. Thank you all. You guys do good work.
thank you, Ken. Thanks for participating. Okay, so there we are. Another great meeting. If there is nothing else, no other public comment. Davia, is there anything else I forgot to talk about? Anything you need to talk about?
Can I do a PSA entirely unrelated other than the Oregon Conservation Strategy? Came to the department's attention, I think it was yesterday, that pet stores have been taking shipments of Massimo moss balls, which are betta fish companions that are just absolutely full of invasive mussels. And we're just trying to get the word out there, put some pressure on the pet shops. If you know anyone that has a betta fish, I have a betta fish, and I have one of these balls, but it is a 4-year-old one. But scary moment on the invasive species front here in the Pacific Northwest. Seems like they're coming in shipments through Seattle, but I'm just telling everyone I can.
What is it that I'm not sure what it is? What's the stuff that you're looking for?
They are zebra mussels, and they are living in these little green fluffy moss balls that pet stores sell to float in your fish tank. And zebra mussels are in them. And so if your fish dies and you decide to flush the fish and the moss ball, that's a huge introduction moment of zebra mussels here.
Okay, got it.
So big risk on the invasive species front, and tell your friends, tell everyone you know.
Thank you, Davia.
Sure.
Okay, well then, we once again, I think, got some good things done, and our next meeting is what, second Friday of, which is it, first or second Friday?
It is the first Friday of April, which is April 2nd at 10 a.m.
Great. All right, great. Well, we'll have some more to talk about then. We'll have more information on the legislation. And okay, Chris, go fishing. All right, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.